Welcome to the No Fear podcast and the No Fear live broadcast. I'm your host, Tony Lauer. If you're into mindset training, performance psychology, personal development, you'll dig this new format. No Fear Live is a unique broadcast, and it's different from the No Fear podcast. We decided to go live because we wanted to create the opportunity to interact with people like you all over the world, where anyone can log in and ask questions, and in some cases, you may even get invited into the show. The great thing about the live broadcast is that it's much more personal for the listener. That's you. Remember, self-defense isn't always about a confrontation with someone else. The first and most important fight is winning the one inside your head. All right. Hey, everyone. I got a very special guest today, Dan Caldwell. Dan, welcome to the No Fear Live show. How you doing, buddy?
What's up, Tony? How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. So a lot of people will know who you are in my audience because it's mostly cops, military, martial artists, and they should know who you are. But you're kind of like behind the scenes famous, right? As one of the founders of the amazing brand TapouT, that every one of us, whether you could fight or not, had one of those shirts. And it's amazing. I want to pop up this picture right away to kick off the show because we were talking before we came on live. Look at this. This is insane.
I can't. I know it's one of the UFCs, but I can't remember which one. It's just so many at that time.
No wrinkles, no gray hair, and crazy sunglasses. Do you still have those glasses?
We both got our shades on inside. I love it.
Right, shades on inside. And check this out, like no tattoos on me.
Yeah,
I got, nuts. So I thought that was a fun one to kick that off. And I look at pictures like this, dude, and you're in your 50s, I'm in my 60s, and it's like, seriously, how fast did that go by?
Like it was like yesterday. I mean, I felt like, in some ways, I feel like I've had so many lives because I've lived all these pockets of lives along the way. But in other ways, I feel like that was yesterday.
It's amazing. When I reached out to you, I've been, we've messaged each other many times over the years. How you doing? Just quick check-ins. We never really, hung out outside of, bumping into each other at UFCs and stuff like that. And just always amazed. It's like you said, every time you pop up, you're creating a new business or a new chapter or a new, have you always been a serial entrepreneur? Like in heart and spirit?
In heart and spirit, for sure. When I was 13 years old, I started my own DJ business. I was DJing my junior high school with my best friend, and then we started DJing all our high schools and all the high schools in the area. So in that way, I always felt like I was going to be an entrepreneur, and I knew I would come back to that someday. But I took this when I was in high school. I took this elective class on law enforcement, and I fell in love with kind of the whole idea of law enforcement, chasing bad guys, getting in car chases, helping people. It always felt like something I wanted to do. We had grown up in a really bad neighborhood, and my parents were, I would say, poor. We were rich in love and rich in the fact that my parents are still married to each other, but we lived in a neighborhood that was going downhill quick in San Bernardino, California, which was, when I graduated, the murder capital of the United States of America. And we lived smack dab in the middle of kind of a war zone where drive-bys were happening. We'd been in shootouts in the front yard, our front yard. Me, my dad, my brother, shooting back and forth with a guy who was trying to break into one of our cars. My mom had been mugged on our doorsteps. We had regular fights just standing outside. But it never felt crazy. It always felt like that was kind of just how it was. I didn't know there was difference.
That's freaking insane. I didn't know that. And I didn't know, in knowing you for the last couple of decades, I didn't know till recently that you were a police officer.
Oh, really? Yeah. Me and Charles were both cops. So in
That's
1993,
wild.
we were going through the police academy and saw this advertisement for this Ultimate Fighting Championship coming. And we said, oh my gosh, we got to watch this thing. And we sat down and watched it, saw Hoist Gracie beat up, 3 guys that night, twice his size, and said, we need to be learning that. Whatever he's doing, we need to know how to do that, because it's so, you'll recognize that every art has its weaknesses, but it felt like a law enforcement type martial art. It felt like that's what we have to do in law enforcement: get guys down to the ground, get them into custody, and get some cuffs on them. And I felt like, just watching what we were doing in the police academy, I felt like we were not doing this right. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to fight a guy who's 220 pounds. I was like 170 at the time. There's no way I'm going to be able to deal with some guy who's 230 pounds. I just have zero chance of beating this guy. And I felt like jiu-jitsu at the time was kind of an equalizer, what turned into mixed martial arts.
Love it. I love it. Was your, we'll hijack the flow of this. Was your agency receptive, or did they think, or did you do it personally, or did the agency start looking at bringing in? Because of course we know now, like Gracie Grappo and the Gracie has a whole law enforcement division, but that's taken, if you think about, like, from the first UFC, 1993, and incidentally, were you at the first one in Colorado? Or
No. I didn't go to. I think our first one was like 27. We had already started TapouT, and so we were kind of moving along. That was our first one that we had actually attended.
It was crazy, because I was at the first one writing for 3 magazines, and interviewed Hoist and Horian, and I forget, there was I forget that. You remember Zane? It was Zane Frazier. Was that
Zane Frazier? Yeah.
Him and a couple of guys, because of my panic attack videos that had come out in the 80s. A couple of guys there, when I was walking around interviewing, they were like, "Oh my God, because of your panic attack videos, I'm doing this." Like, that got me into just full on beating the shit out of each other. So I always make the joke, we were doing Fight Club before Fight Club was a movie,
right?
So was your agency receptive, or you and Charles were just doing this personally because you knew you needed that on the street?
Yeah, we a week after the very first UFC, we had caught an article in Black Belt that had like preempted the UFC coming out, because they knew it was going to happen, and found out that he had this academy in Torrance, and we were based in San Bernardino, which is about an hour and a half away. So a week after the first UFC, we were doing our first free class at the Torrance Academy, and walking in there, and it's so crazy, because we had just watched the UFC, and I don't know if you'd never met Hoist and you'd only had the UFC as a reference.
Yeah,
he had this kind of menacing look, and he was quiet, and it was scary a little bit. And when we first went in there to train with him, he walked by us and shook our hand, and hi guys, and we're like, we didn't know what to think about it. But the first thing he did was ask us to kind of attack him as our first move. Not like hard, but I didn't know. He called me out to the mat. I was the first person he called out to the mat. And in my head, I'm thinking, he's going to ask me, like, you do real shit, like things, like, I don't know if he's going to ask me to punch him, and like he's going to try to punch me and like break my arm. So my heart was beating out of my chest as he walks me out to the mat. And luckily he just asked me to lay on the ground, and he kind of did the demonstration about how I can hit you and you can't hit me. And it was just a really cool day, and something I always remember.
Yeah, of course. No, that's legendary. So there's so many things that we can talk about, and so many like little chapters. And 2 things that I want, and I'm going to just make a note here, because we'll end up we'll talk for the whole 45 minutes, hour, then take some question and answers if there are any from the audience, because we are streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook right now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's going live, and then it'll be uploaded to Spotify and Apple and all that shit. But there's a couple of things that I want to make sure we touch on, because and not now. We'll kind of wrap towards that. I'm just making a note here. One is the transition from law enforcement into business, because there's a lot of cops right now because of the shit going on in the world, and also maybe it's the end of their career. Just that psychology, because you are a business coach, mentor. You've got your podcast that we'll talk about, and it's all about entrepreneurship. And you can be an entrepreneur at, like Dan said, he was a kid and he started doing DJing, but you can also be an entrepreneur when you're 70. You got an idea. It doesn't matter. You just got to go for it. Right. So one thing I want to make sure we talk about, making a note, is transitioning from a government job or any job where you're beholden to somebody else saying, show up here and do this, and the entrepreneurship. And then I forgot the other one, but it'll come to me. But that was the big thing, just the entrepreneur angle, because we'll end up talking about all these crazy stories and phases in your life that I can relate to. And the whole No Fear podcast is all about understanding the psychology of fear. The most important fear we all need to manage, of course, is when there's sudden violence. But sudden danger could be health, financial, family, relationship, and the impact it has on our emotional, psychological self is almost identical. The only difference is, we have a maxim: if you don't control your fear, right, you can't control the fight, you can't control yourself, and you've got to control the psychological fear. But the only difference is, in terms of managing violence, is I can, if I've got a financial crisis, I can cry for a couple of days. I can pace around the house. I can try a few things. I could YouTube. I finally call an expert and get some advice. You don't have that much time in a violent encounter, right? So you can't meditate. You can't woosah. You can't walk around the house and say, hey, if you stab me again, I'm going to have to call the police. So you can't outsource your safety there. So, but that's basically kind of the theme of the No Fear angle, just to plant that seed in your head there. I wanted to ask you to share what I think is one of the coolest stories I've ever read that you told, and that is, how you kicked off TapouT with the UFC, and you wrote about it a couple of months ago, and that's when I hit you up, and it was, for lack of a better term, telling white lies as an entrepreneur to get indoors and get things going. And I don't want to say too much, because do you know what story I'm talking about?
No, I'm not. I'm trying to put it together.
It was shit, man. I'll tell something to see if this jolts it, because I don't remember. I don't remember the exact specifics now, but it just popped in my head. It was really how you kicked off the brand and the relationship with the UFC. There was something that you did, and I'm embarrassed right now that I can't remember.
Well, I could just tell you the whole beginning. I mean, it was truly, we were the mouse in front of the flashlight the whole time. In the beginning stages of us, we were both police officers. We're trying to figure out how to, we're really just selling at these small jiu-jitsu events where we'd set up a little table and throw a few clothes on them. And a lot of, law enforcement was kind of going to the events at the time. So we were seeing police buddies and stuff there, and other law enforcement guys that knew we were law enforcement. And we haven't really taken on a personas at that time either. So later we kind of started to take on some personas. But when we first started sponsoring fighters, we didn't have any money really. We were living off of our credit cards and some of our salaries coming in, but you're kind of living to your means. And so when we had guys fighting in the UFC, we were only able to pay them. They were only getting paid like $2,000 to fight in the UFC. Jeremy Horn and Pat Miletich were our first UFC guys that we ever sponsored, and I believe UFC 18. And when we were sponsoring them, we'd pay them like $500, $1,000 to wear our clothes in there, and without any other sponsors. It wasn't NASCAR back then. It was just big TapouT logo, and a hat. But people didn't know that we could barely pay our rent at the time. So, you have all these guys walking into the UFC. They're wearing these big shirts and hats, and people are thinking that we're like rich, but we're surviving. We're barely surviving, trying to buy new product, because when you're financing a company and you're self-capitalized, most of your money is sitting on the shelf. So at one time, even when we were doing millions of dollars, I can remember doing $5, $6, $7 million in sales. And we were dirt poor. I was living in a condo. I couldn't pay my rent. because when you're growing as a company and you're self-capitalized, all your money is sitting on the shelves. So we had $1 million worth of inventory up there, but I didn't have money to pay my rent.
Wow.
And so we were always living hand to mouth for a long time until we started to, if you think about it, we had millions of dollars of equity because the company's probably worth some money at that point. We have tons of products sitting on the shelves. We're employing people. We had a building. We had lots going on, lots of momentum at the time. But every penny we made, we were looking to put back into advertising because the UFC's growing. We're having to keep up with their advertising dollar and how much it cost to be in there. But they were always helping us. They brought us in. I remember our first meeting with Zuffa because we were pre-Zuffa too. So we had been sponsoring it when Merowitz owned the UFC. We weren't sponsoring the UFC, but we were sponsoring fighters, and we had a relationship with the UFC. But when Zuffa bought it, the Fertittas and Dana White bought it in 2001. Our first meeting with them was September 11th in Vegas. So it was kind of a weird mood because we're in there watching a big television as the buildings are being crashed into and people are dying, but we're also trying to have this amazing conversation with Dana and Lorenzo and Frank, and they're telling us that you guys will always be a part of the UFC. As long as we own this company, you guys will be a part of it. And it was a great day in that way for us, sure. But it was it was a balance of emotions because so much was going on that day, but a day I'll always remember.
Yeah. It's amazing because I was down at Fort Bragg on September 11, working with some boys down there when it happened.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
What a place to be. I'm sure you guys were on high alert.
Well, dude, like of all the places for a guy who teaches combatives to military and law enforcement, of all the places to be, it was the most exciting and also the most insane. And there's stuff that I can't talk about. And I never don't talk about it much. People who, there's a few guys who are operators from back then who've mentioned that on their podcasts, Dutch Moyer, Pat McNamara and stuff like that. And if you know who they are, you know where it was.
Yeah.
But it was insane because I was a foreign national. I'm an American citizen now, but I was a foreign national at the time. And they politely asked me to, get off post as a foreign national. And they had rounded up all these other people that were sitting there with people because nobody knew what was going on. Mm-hmm. And all the gates got closed. They were Stinger missiles up, just insane. How just the whole place got activated. But airports were closed. I was stuck in Fayetteville. And probably one of the biggest compliments I had, I know this is an interview with you, but you made me think about that by bringing up 9/11, is I got a call 2 days after. I'm sitting in my hotel, and the troop that I was working with, there's other people, like there's certain elements within the military that are in a training cycle and certain guys that are deployed, and you don't switch that up. So you always have. So obviously I was working with guys that were domestic training. And one of the biggest compliments I ever had was these guys called me and said, you can't come on post because you're Canadian, right? But we'll come meet you somewhere. We want to continue training with you this week. And I had a buddy of mine, Rondon Vito, who developed a line system for the Marine Corps. And he had a dojo and he closed it for the week and let us use it. And I continued training those guys, but that was a fucking insane time, man. Holy shit.
Yeah, I bet.
So I'm going to tell a short story about how I got high gear, my equipment going.
Right.
And I think it's going to jolt a couple of stories of yours like that. And it's bugging me. It's crazy because as soon as we finish, I'll remember the exact thing. You did something exactly like this. And I'm going to tell this really quick because this is me interviewing you. But I spent 5 years prototyping my high gear suit,
Right.
And I'm trying to get it into military and law enforcement because I know this will make training more realistic. If they could do force on force where you could muzzle strike somebody, you could headbutt with a helmet on, and you're not going to fuck up a role player. And so I was doing something at Little Creek with SEAL Team 4. And I said, hey, they said, we love your stuff, but all combatives is now managed through Naval Special Warfare in Coronado. I said, can I have a point of contact there? They gave me this guy who's retired now, Mike Jaco. The LAPD was doing, I don't know if you remember this, when they contacted every well-known martial artist in the world to create the ultimate defensive tactic system. They had Hoist, Machado's, Benny the Jet, Bill Wallace, Joe Louis. I don't know if you remember this. It was in all the martial art magazines. They were trying to do like a Frankenstein. And they contacted me and I said, guys, I said, first of all, most cops are the laziest athletes I know. Like, right? It's like, you and Charles were exceptions if you were looking for ways to do stuff, to do more stuff. You know that.
Right.
It's like getting 50 of the best martial artists in the world to say, here's my favorite move, which they developed over a lifetime of not passion, but obsession. And then thinking you could just, like Frankenstein, screw it on to like the average recruit. I said, like, this is going to backfire. But they didn't like that. So, I was just too honest. But I called up Naval Special Warfare. And because I was reading this in the magazine, I had like names and the agency. I said, hey, I'm coming to LA. I got a meeting with LAPD to show them my high gear prototype for their force on force training. Now, this wasn't true, right? I just had the names from the meetings and stuff.
Right.
And I knew that LAPD and these guys had cross-trained. So the guys at Naval Special Warfare said, really, you're meeting with LAPD? They said, huh. And I said, okay, we'll meet with you. I said, I said, when are you meeting with LAPD? They said, they're getting back to me on the day at a time, but I'm flying out this week. Pick a time, I'll work around them. So they said, okay, Wednesday. I immediately called up LAPD after, when I had the date and the time and the name. I said, I'm coming down to meet Mike at Naval Special Warfare to show my gear while I'm showing. And it basically went like this. He heard LAPD was looking at the gear and said, okay, I want to look at it. And LAPD said, oh, the SEALs were looking at it. Yeah. And I went out, and that SEAL team actually jump-started our whole company.
Wow.
And you did something very similar to that. And
I'm sure it was maybe the Ultimate Fighter story where we were sleeping on Chuck Liddell's couch and they wouldn't let us sponsor the show because and we're like, we had heard that this Ultimate Fighter show was coming on, and that's really what changed TapouT. Like we were a struggling company until 2005-6. And when we heard this Ultimate Fighter was coming, we didn't know exactly what it was going to do, but we were like attacking everything. So it's like, we're going to be everywhere. And so I was driving down to San Diego at the time with my daughter, and I got a call from Charles. Hey, Chuck Liddell just called me. He's just got to Vegas. They're about to start filming Ultimate Fighter. We got to go to Vegas tonight. So I was like, oh man, I got to tell my daughter that we're going to have to turn back around. We were on our way to SeaWorld. And so I turned back around. We came up. And Charles met me at my house because I'm on the way to Vegas in San Bernardino. He was living at Huntington Beach at the time. We jumped in the car, drove straight to Vegas. We had all these clothes with us, and the whole back end of our cars or van is filled with clothes because we didn't know if we were going to be able to give them out or what we could do. So we got there. We're sleeping on Chuck Liddell's couch in his apartment that they got him, and every night we would go sneak over to where we knew the gym was for the Ultimate Fighter show. And they have those little slots, on those like business complexes on those on the doors where they stick the mail in. Well, we would stuff that slot full of TapouT clothes. We didn't know if it was going to get to the fighters, but we knew the fighters had to be getting there early. So we just said, we're just going to put so many clothes in this place that they're not going to want to throw them away. And eventually they're going to end up somewhere. Somebody's going to have one. I don't know if it's the camera guys, because sometimes the camera guys will get caught on film, or the fighters or what. But to this day, if you ask any of the producers of the show, if any TapouT's in season one, they'll say, absolutely not. We didn't have any sponsors. but I promise you, watch the season. You'll see TapouT throughout the season. And I don't know if it's because Chuck got it to him or a fighter had the stuff already, or if it was the stuff we were sticking in the slots every night. But, we were just relentless, and we didn't have the money to not be. So we just kept being relentless. And ultimately, the finale of The Ultimate Fighter 1, we're sitting in, it was at Thomas and Mack, not Thomas and Mack, the small event center in the Las Vegas at the university there. And we're sitting in there and the show's going, and everybody knows there's something electric going on here. Everybody's kind of like, you could just feel it. I've been to a ton of UFCs. It was different. It was a smaller event, but there was something different going on. And I don't know if it was the live cameras or what was going on there, but at one point, Dana walks back to Chuck and says, there's 10 million people watching this show right now. It's unbelievable. We've never had a viewership like this before. And people are going crazy. And then Stephan Bonner and Forrest Griffin start fighting. And they put on, what is still today one of the best fights in UFC history, still in the top 10. And just an unbelievable fight. And our logos are on the mat. And what I didn't know was the UFC just trying to fill up space, even though we hadn't paid for this position. They had come to us, but we didn't have the money. They gave it to us anyway, which was, that big position that Budweiser gets where they go, this show's been brought to you by Budweiser, the king of beer. Well, they did that for us. This show's been brought to you by TapouT at inyourface.com. Back then we didn't own TapouT.com yet. So we're at inyourface.com where you could get the, whatever, the expression of combat. And my web guy calls me, and the last fight is going on. And he calls me and he goes, what the is going on? And I said, what are you talking about? I could barely hear him. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, your website's crashing. What's going on? I go, what are you talking about? He goes, you're getting 3,000 orders an hour right now. I have no idea. I couldn't even, your systems can't even register the credit cards that are coming in so fast. So I had to downgrade the system so it's only capturing all the credit cards. It can't process them. And when we got home to 30,000 orders. So it was an insane week for us, and it literally changed the whole, changed our business totally. And we were never the same after that. That's basically what turned on our TV show. Once they had their success of their show, they approached us about doing a show. The production company that was doing their show. So we got signed on for 3 seasons of our own TV show. Unfortunately, my partner got killed before the 3rd season. So we did 2 seasons of our show, but it was just a life-changing event all the way around. You just never know, being at the right place at the right time when, everybody says, oh yeah, you guys just, you guys blew up out of nowhere. We didn't blow up out of nowhere. We've been doing this since 1997. It was 2006. So over the 10 years of building that company, yeah, we blew up, but it was not only being at the right place at the right time, but it was doing the right thing and putting in the right effort. It all came together and actually, is what changed our lives.
Yeah, dude, honestly, as a friend, but as an entrepreneur, I had goosebumps throughout that story. And I remember reading it, and that was the story that I was trying to remember. And I was right. My high gear story triggered that.
Yeah.
That's why I don't want to be, I was going to say win, because that's not what it's about. That's this relentlessness is the difference between the guy with a good idea and then the guy who's actually made it come to fruition. And the stuff that you did, and I know a lot of people that are entrepreneurs that in the last minute would not change a trip and drive to Vegas and think to shove shit in the door. Like that stuff, like when I was reading it, I went, that's everything I would do. And a lot of people around me who either work for me or get mentored by me, like it's like I'm always telling them, just try to keep up, because I'm going to fucking burn you out. Because it's you go. Hormozi just said something really interesting. You follow Hormozi online, I'm sure, right? he said something very controversial. I'm sure a lot of life coaches didn't like it, but he said something to the effect. I should just read it so I don't fuck it up. But he said like everyone is selling these like magic morning routines, and you do this and you do this. He says and I'm paraphrasing. He said when you're building your company, you don't do any of that shit. When you've finally made a whole shitload of money and you have a whole team, you go, oh, you know what? I'm going to do yoga in the morning and I'm going to take ice bath and I'm going to do that. But when you're in like the obsessive stages of building your shit,
right?
Like you're not really doing that shit. You're with your daughter, and then Charles goes, hey, we need to get to Vegas, and you go, hey, honey, rain check, I gotta fucking go.
Yeah.
And that's, can you, I mean, do you agree with what Hormozy said?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and that's true. Like, it's like, it's weird because that's why I'm kind of in a weird place in my life right now. I'm trying to create some balance in my life so that my kids see me, and it's, it's a work in progress. That's what our podcast is all about. Our Pretty and Punk podcast. It's basically me and my wife talking through how to be an entrepreneur with children, because it's not easy. Oh, there we are.
There you go.
Yeah. Thanks for putting that up.
Talk about the whole thing now. This is important.
Yeah. So it's just, trying to, how do you become an entrepreneur? How do you have some balance in your life? Because you'll never find perfect balance. It's sometimes, and what we've found is that sometimes you need to give a little bit more here, and your partners need to understand that everybody works together as a team, and everybody, we talk through everything together. If I'm going through, I talked through this podcast before I left to go with my wife. I was actually going to do it at home, but my wife needed the office. So she has her own stuff going on too. She's an entrepreneur who's made millions of dollars in her companies too. So nice. It's, we're both entrepreneurs, and we have these conversations constantly, because there's things we're building together. There's things she's building on her own. There's things I'm building on my own, but it's like we're doing it all together, because we're always constantly having these conversations and talking things through. So it's really like we're doing it together. It's like a team effort, and even our kids are involved. I want my kids to know when I tell my son and my daughter, that we're about to do this podcast, and this is what the podcast is about. And this is the guy who's interviewing me. And this is why I'm going to answer some of these questions this way. And this is why I'm probably going to bring this up. I want him to understand that. I want them to understand that, because in a minute, they're not going to, they're not going to learn this in school. Nobody at school is going to teach them how to run a business, how to speak, how to be influential, how to, be relentless. They're going to tell you to, lay back, be nice, chill out, don't talk to people. It's like they teach you everything that is not being successful. And so if your kids, and my kids are homeschooled, so that's not going to be an issue, but your kids are not going to learn what they need to survive in this, especially tomorrow's world. This world's changing quick, and we're starting to lose the middle class. It's like you're either going to be over here or you're going to be over here, and there's no middle ground anymore. And so you have to fight your ass off if you're going to stay, in the top half. And I hate that it's like that. I wish there was. I love the fact that, my parents talk about when they were growing up, they didn't have, it was like, it was easy, and it wasn't easy. Everybody struggled, but it was, you had this tight family household, and that, people, it was like Leave It to Beaver almost, but it wasn't. And I just feel like tomorrow's world it's going to be a war zone. You're going to be in a foxhole, and you're going to have to do things and make decisions. And as a kid right now, my kid's, he's 6 years old. He's speaking up on stages in front of 3,000 people, delivering a 10-minute speech. I mean, I don't give him no slack, but yet I love him unconditionally with everything I have, and I speak to him kindly, and so I have a balance of that. And I think it's in business, I'm trying to find that, because I was so relentless for so long, where I took pride in going, I wake up before you guys, I work harder than you guys every day, and I go to sleep after you guys every day. I took pride in that, and now trying to figure out, what that looks like tomorrow. it's interesting, and I'm going through it every day. I still go through it. My wife and me talk through it on our podcast and trying to figure out. Sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes we make a decision. We're like, we got to rework this because this is not. We just started talking to. I heard this conversation that this guy was having. He was like, we had this deal with our kids, and our kids were interrupting us a lot during business meetings because we take them on all of our business meetings. And I happened to catch this thing on social media, this guy talking about how he deals with his kids. And I said, oh, that's ours. We're taking that
Right.
because it was this kid. He has this thing where when we're talking to adults and our kid walks up and they want to say something, they just put their hand on our shoulder or on our leg, and we just put our hand on top of them just to let them know that we acknowledge them, that they're there. And then at some point during the conversation, I'll ask them, what do they need? And it was just that simple thing, those little things that you learn to like solve a little problem and we're just trying to create this perfect relationship, and we're having fun doing it, building something together, building this empire together.
I love it. You touched on it at the end, but the rant about preparing your kids for tomorrow's world is so important. I just posted a few. I shared Tom DeBlass's some stuff of like bullying shit, and I said, like these sociopath 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds are soon going to be 15, 16, and then 18, 19. And it was 11 years old. I pulled your hair and threw you to the ground. What are they doing in 5 years from now? And it's scary how the lawlessness that's out there. It never used to be. There was always violence. Cavemen were violent, but it was pockets. It was at times opportunistic, but often very targeted because you were really in the wrong place at the wrong time or with the wrong people in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now it's just all over the place, and it's insane. So tomorrow's world is an important rant. And the message here for parents listening to this is something that, my kids are 32, 26, and 21 now. And I, had I watched, your podcast, Pretty and Punk, had I seen that other one, I'd have done things different because I was, before it was cool to be on the road and doing seminars all over the world, that's what I was doing. I remember one year I did, I think, almost 270 seminar days on the road. I make the joke, I'd come home and I'd come in the door and the kids would scream, intruder, intruder. And I go, no, it's me. You just don't recognize me. But but it's now we're close. We love each other, but I need to fight for their attention because during their formative years, I never gave it to them. They knew I loved them and I was always there for them, but it's a big regret that I carry with me. So parents listening out there, you find those ways because there's a time when you can't influence how the relationship they have with you or how they relate with other adults and then become adults. So it's amazing. How old you said one of your boys 6?
6, and my daughter's 4.
Okay.
But
yeah. So
but I have older kids too, Tony, and I know exactly what you went through, and that's I went through that. And it's crazy because the timeline's kind of backwards. They really need you at the beginning, but that's when your business needs you too. So depending on when you started your business, my business, I started when they were babies, my older ones who are 16, 19, and 22. I started that when they were younger, when they were babies, and I missed that too. I missed a lot of that. And I realized looking back, I mean, I was there for a lot of it too. I would purposely make games and go out of my way to drive my daughter to her soccer games across country in our RV. Like I made moments for that. And luckily our business was kind of coming into full stride at that time. So I had people that I could rely on to handle that. And eventually I sold the company a lot for those reasons too. It's hard because when you're first building your company, you're trying to create some balance. There isn't going to be balance, and just take some comfort. And if you care about that, the hardest thing is when you care that you're missing some of that. That means you're a good parent. You want to be a good parent.
Right.
You're trying to do your best. And so just express that to your children. Let them know how much you want to be there, and let them know that that you care, and call them in the middle of it when you can, and make it a point to ask for videos, and fly out there if you can. Do those extra things that you can do if you can, when you can, because there's going to be times when you can't.
Yeah, I love that. You just reminded me of in the 80s, I read this and I wrote it down somewhere that I would see it every day because my son, who's my firstborn, 32 now, things didn't work out with his mom and I ended up getting custody of him at 3 months old, which is unheard of. Mm-hmm. And I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I just closed my school. I had just booked a seminar tour of Australia, and my girlfriend and I split up. I have custody of the kid, which is just really unusual anywhere in the world, but unheard of in Canada. Like, you just don't, like, the mom automatically gets the kid. And right. I'd say to my mom, I said, hey, I've got this 1 month tour of Australia coming up, and I can't change it now because we've already booked it. The flights are booked, like, everything's done. It's coming up, and I don't know what to do now. And she just looked at me and she said, well, you made a choice. You've got to take care of your kid. You've got to, your business and everything you thought you were going to do is going to completely change. And I got really depressed, and I sat there, and I remember I was watching, do you remember the old movie Samurai and Son? The old samurai movies. They're really graphic and violent. You should watch it. If you haven't seen it,
no.
Google just on Netflix, Samurai and Son or whatever. Just insane samurai fighting and insane. Like, if Monty, you remember Monty Python blood scenes? Monty Python, like, right. If Monty Python met a samurai, it was like that. And I remember sitting there one night watching this, and it was about this. The storyline was the wife gets killed by the evil shogun, and the father is now traveling the country, killing everyone that was responsible for this. Right. And it's just him and his son in a wheelbarrow type cart, and he's just killing everyone. And I just said, you know what, Mom? No, it's just going to be Samurai and Son. I'm going to take Nick to Australia, even though he's going to be like 6 months old at the time. What a nightmare that was, but I did it. Right. And so you're right. I still have my regrets. They knew that I loved them. And parents listening to this, it's an interesting thing because you reminded me of this really powerful quote, which I started off this little segue with, and the quote was, "Nothing affects a child's life more than a parent's unlived life." Nothing affects a child's life more than a parent's unlived life. So if you have something in you that's going to help you self-actualize and become the best version of yourself, you need to explore that. And and you said it earlier, Dan, like, everyone talks about work-life balance. There isn't. It's just you do the best you can to juggle. And the tricky part is self-awareness evolves as you gain experience. So, we all say, hey, self-awareness is the magic, the superpower. But my self-awareness when I was 20 changed when I was 25, changed when I was 30, changed when I was my first kid. Same with you, same with anybody.
Absolutely.
As you get older, you get more wisdom. So you don't know. There's a great Richard Feynman quote. He says, the first rule is to never fool yourself, and just remember you're the easiest person to fool. And what he's talking about there is how easily we rationalize this materialistic purchase, or this, I'm going to pivot here and do that. And we're rationalizing a lot of that stuff, and you find out after, but that's all part of life.
It is. And I think that's great that you brought your son with you. I mean, I think today, I think we can do that more, and we should do that more. It's like the world of, back, I kind of digress back to the late 1800s when you were running a farm or you were running a mercantile or whatever. Your kids were part of that business. It was a family unit. And I think that's what when I have to look back and go, how did my relationships fall apart? How did my obviously when you lose your relationship, your kids are kind of out of the picture, and it's like and so I vowed to myself when I got married for the first time and had my two younger kids now, that I would never get a divorce. I don't care what happened, where it happened. We're here. We're lifers. We're here in the cell together. Nobody's getting out. So we're here together to do this. And I think part of what keeps that relationship great is that I bring my family to those things when I can. Even if they can't participate in everything that I do, that they're seeing some of that, and I bring them to what I can. I brought my kids to big meetings before, and they sit in there very quiet and listen. And where else are they going to get that opportunity? I know I didn't have that opportunity when I was little, and it's just something that it's like, how does a kid become a great farmer in the 1800s or a great blacksmith? By sitting there watching their dad or their mom do something. It's like they learn that through example. They learn more from what we do through example than what we tell them to do. And so I just try to do that as much as I can. That's some of our secret sauce. But there's, it's like everybody to each his own. They got to find their own way. But that's what's working for us.
Dude, I'm so glad you said that, because I haven't spoken to anybody, the more we talk, the more I realize there's like, this parallel evolution. And I think it's more about just, we're about 10 years apart, but as serial entrepreneurs, you go through that experience. And I'm so glad you said what you did, because I feel about 20 pounds lighter, because in the last few years, I've kind of manufactured a whole bunch of guilt about that, as I'll come in and I'll say to my daughter, hey, let's go to the beach, go swimming. Oh, no, thanks. I don't want to, Dad. I'll go to my other kid. Hey, what are you doing later? You want to go to dinner? Oh, no, I already got plans. I'll call my son. Hey, I'm coming up to LA. He lives and works up in LA. Hey, I'm coming up this weekend. What are you doing? I'm going to be with some friends in Santa Barbara, Dad. And I'm like, what's that classic song about,
Cats in the Cradle. Cats in the Cradle would scare me. It literally would scare me to death. I remember being a little kid and hearing that, and knew my family wasn't like that. And I would be scared to death in my teenage years of, please don't let me ever go through that with my family growing up.
Yeah. So it was heavy. And I'm so glad you said that, because I started flashing back to literally for like every single trip. And I was on the road every couple of weeks, every trip up until, I don't know if it's still this way in the airlines, you could fly your kids for free. Every trip, I'd buy a ticket with my wife. We get, and the three kids, and they went everywhere, all over the world, seeing me teach, hanging out, and coming to seminars. There's one of my ground fighting videos. I'm in the middle of teaching, and Nick got bored. He was watching, and he's like 7 years old, and I guess he wanted to go to the bathroom or something, but I was in the middle of a demo. So like he's crawling out, and he forgets that he's like and he crawls and the camera guy goes, oh yeah, Nick just video. And I said, hey Nick, I made him come in and do something on the film, but it was just, I just remembered I did a lot more than I remembered. Thanks for that, man.
Isn't that a great moment? Like, what if you could go back to that in the video, and go, like, those are the moments that, like, I had a chance to put my kids in our TV show here and there. The producers were they had a lot of pushback from it, and they cut a lot of stuff out. But looking back, you'll like that moment that was, have you ever seen that newscaster that is in the middle of a newscast, and he's like, they're going to him as an expert, and he's at home, during COVID, and all of a sudden the little kid comes running in, and he's running around behind him, and the nanny's chasing him around, trying to grab him. I mean,
classic.
He probably thought it was the end of his life. Like, this is the end of my world. They're never going to call me again. I'm done.
Right.
But he will look back on that video 10 years from then and go, that is the best moment. I'm so glad we caught that they'll never be able to take that away from me. or my kid. I'll be able to show that to my kid. My kid will be showing that. We'll be showing that at my kid's wedding. You know, it's like, those are great moments that you don't realize are really moments that are meant to be. Like, you never know when you lose something. Like, I lost my job as a police officer, and I thought my life was over. Like, I was like, my life is over. What happened was the company, the department was getting absorbed by the sheriff's department, and they were picking and choosing who they're bringing on, who they're keeping. And I didn't make the cut. I was a young officer. I didn't end up making the cut. I didn't have any college degree. And I literally thought my life is over. I'm never going to get hired. I'm done. And I thought my life was over. And little did I know that God was setting me up for TapouT. It became the best thing that ever happened to me. Sure. I went to work for a college police department. I'm like humiliated. I'm thinking, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing right now. This is not what I had planned out for my life. And this is it, But I wanted to believe the best, but this is not my circumstance right now. Right now, I'm working for a college, the police department. This is not where I want to be. And then lo and behold, my partner comes to me one day and says, hey, what do you think about starting this t-shirt company, with jujitsu and stuff? And my license plate's called TapouT. Why didn't we call it TapouT? And, the rest is history.
That's nuts. And that's probably a good pivot to, those of you listening who've studied the no fear, and we'll talk about it at the end of the show, but there's a whole program. It's just not like a cool way to say no fear. Oh, you're copying the adrenaline company and you made it. I mean, that was an epiphany back in the 90s of, wait a minute, there isn't such a thing as no fear, N-O. But the more you get to know fear, the more resilient you become. The more you get to know fear, the more experience you have, the more wisdom you have. And now you're making faster decisions. So when you lost your job as a cop, you freaked out. That weatherman or newscaster, when his kid came in there, he's freaking out. Right now, if some circumstance changed, like when COVID happened, all of my business was in-person training, law enforcement, military. Mm-hmm. I had 35 courses get canceled during 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And I was sitting there for a minute, Dan, going, oh, this is fun. I'll hang out at home and okay, let's spend more time with the family. And then all of a sudden the CFO in me is going, wait a minute, I'm a small boutique company. Everyone's 1099. I got 3 employees because we're this tiny little group. I just lost $500,000 in training.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable. And for 24 hours, I was in a panic. I mean, like this, I was like, wow, the panic was in my head. Right. And then 24 hours later, I had a meeting with my team and I said, okay, guys, what can we do online? What are all the things we can do online with our intellectual property, with our systems, with our contacts? And 3 months later, we had multiple websites out and courses online, and I'm doing stuff on Zoom and Skype and all sorts of shit. But that wouldn't have happened if I was 20 years old and it was my first business, like that transition. So, talk a little bit about here. It's more of an observation, but as we transition into what does it mean to be an entrepreneur, and how does somebody go from being a cop or being anything going, oh, fuck, because you said something very powerful. And that is, when some sort of relationship ends, when a deal ends, and this started off with the strength of your marriage, now is because a relationship ended and you went, no, we're fucking lifers now. When you lost that job as a cop, you went, oh my God, this isn't what I want my life to be. And those are heavy, heavy conversations. But if something happened to you now, you might be bummed for an hour or a week or a day or two. But there's a part of your brain that goes, dude, this is the game. This is the roller coaster of life. Mm-hmm. And now, this door closed, this door open. What are we going to do? So, talk.
Yeah, I think I think that always happens, and I should say that being in law enforcement prepared me a lot for that. Even my wife today, like things will happen, and she's like, she wants me to be more upset about it. But I internalize so many, with law enforcement, what cops go through. You understand, you've been in violence, you understand. I love the saying no fear. It's probably one of the best sayings I ever heard in my life.
Thank you.
Like, it's true. Yeah. I think, who is it that says the closer you get to fear, the more you can adapt to it. And I just know that, like, being around that all the time prepares you for, you walk into a room and there's dead people on the ground. You arrive to a scene and the first person, the first place you walk up to is a suspect with a gun who opens the door with a gun pointed at your face, just killed the guy. So you get used to those types of scenarios. Every law enforcement officer has been through this. They all have them. I mean, I wasn't even a cop that long. I was a police officer like 7 years. These guys who go through 40 years, every single one of them have a best-selling book in them. So they're prepared for this. And I think when you prepare yourself for that and you understand that, hey, what worst case scenario is, and we're definitely not close to that yet. So you kind of just know, you get calmer as the situation gets worse almost. And I've always, I should say that I was going crazy when I lost my position. But the truth is, I registered it. I took on and said, what do I need to do to be able to pay my bills? I went and got a job. I started formulating what I'm going to be doing. My buddy knew, my best friend in the world, at the time, Charles Lewis, knew that I was talking to him every day about, like, we got to start a business or do something or, figure something out. Let's go build something. He calls me one day, not out of the blue. He calls me because we've been talking about starting something, and this just happened to be what it was. And so you are always, your mindset is everything. We know going into a fight, it's 90% of the fight usually. If you go in, you can have somebody who's got a lot of skills. If he doesn't have a mindset, he gets in there and crumbles under pressure. He's done. He's not going to last 10 seconds. And then I know guys who got no skill. I'm sure you've seen fights where I've watched guys who I know don't have the skill, but they win the fight because their mindset is I'm not going to lose this fight. Right. They don't know how. I mean, they're throwing punches that don't make sense. They're throwing backhands and flailing punches, but they won't give up. They just keep coming and they break the other person. And I've seen that so many times in jiu-jitsu and MMA, the lesser fighter winning a fight. Clay Guida, people used to tell me about Clay Guida. I don't know if you know him in the UFC, but sure. He's a great fighter, a historic fight career. He's fought the best of the best. Everybody who says they rolled with him says he's not that good. Like, and I don't want to, I hope Clay hears this. He doesn't think that they don't think he's that good. He's great as a fighter. Don't get me wrong, but they say he's not that good. But when he gets in there and he brings the fight to you and his mindset is, I'm going out of here in a body bag or I'm going to win this fight. And he wins the fights. And I think that's a mindset that we all have to take on. We have to know fear. We have to have some relationship with fear all the time and know that, hey, be prepared. I still watch, even today. I watch them almost every day. I watch gunfighting video. I watch a video. We were just talking about little kids now with the situation and going, I watched some 11-year-old shoot 2 kids today. On with the video. I watch a video every day about scenarios that can happen in the, like on security cams, and they kind of show, how the scenario plays out, because I want to see. That's what gets me prepared. If I walk into a liquor store and some guy pulls a gun and puts it to my head, I'm hoping I'm not going to think about it too much. I'm just going to react and, or not react on purpose because it's not time yet. Right. And I'm always preparing myself for those scenarios, just like in business. You prepare yourself for those scenarios, like what can happen here, what can go here. But I'm not crying about it. I'm not voicing that. I internalize a lot of that. And everybody thinks, oh, he's quiet and composed and he doesn't care. My wife thinks sometimes I don't care because I'm composed like that, right. But it doesn't mean I don't care. I'm preparing myself. I'm probably going to be I'm hoping I'm going to be the calmest person in the room if somebody accidentally stabs himself with some scissors, Right. And and I think it's just something that anybody who's in law enforcement or military, I've seen it translate so well into business, because there's nothing in the business world that is going to be half as bad as some of the things that have happened in law enforcement or when you're deployed or whatever, in the military. If you're prepared, if you know fear.
So I was going to ask you to talk about the transition to to being an entrepreneur, and you intuitively, organically kind of blended it. One of the hardest things, and there's a question here from Jason, I'm going to pop up here on here. Jason asks, and I'm going to read it because we got some people who are just on audio. Jason asks, what makes you take the leap to do the business? It's a big, I can't even read. What makes you take the leap to do the business? It's a big risk, ? Do you need to be a risk taker, or do you work your new business alongside your current job? So,
I encourage people to do business alongside their current job. I think risk to me, it's not risk if you know yourself and you're making an educated guess. Yeah, is there risk there? Of course there's risk. There's always going to be risk. But it really is true. Like, I know it's a lot of people say this, that, failure is a learning experience and you actually get a lot from it. Well, I don't want to fail either. I don't want to lose. And I failed on things. Luckily, I've just won on more things than I failed on. But I think that it's not really risk if you understand what you need to do, you're prepared for it, you go in with a good mindset. I knew I was going to win. I didn't know how exactly. I just knew we were going to win this game. And there's been times when I've known I was going to win and I lost because of whatever circumstance, but I learned from those experiences and I moved forward. But I think that I don't call it risk. And I'd say keep your current job. Find a place where I didn't quit. Actually, when I was working on that police department, I actually got hired on another police department, and then I stayed there until 2003. So for 5 years, I kept my job as a police officer while I was also doing TapouT, and I would be on patrol. None of my officers would know that. Like, I would forward the phone calls to my cell phone. So, and I would have ordering. This is early on, like the first 2 years. I would keep these order forms in my back pocket, and I would literally take an order at the office or while I was on patrol if people called in. And if so, every once in a while, I'd have to say, "Listen, man, I'm a cop. I'm taking an order at my office while I'm on patrol, and I have to go because somebody just got shot." I get the beep, 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 and I'd go, "Oh shoot, I got to go. I'm sorry, buddy." And all cops are rolling when you hear that sound. So those things happen, but you just keep moving through those things. And I would definitely keep your job if you can, especially if you're supporting a family or something. You don't want to put those people in undue risk. And you can do that. And that's what's so great about today is you can set up things like eventually to fix that situation. I hired an answering service that took all my orders for me when I was at work. So I would just forward the phone calls to my answering service and they would take all the orders. We have tons of systems in place. There's no excuse because now you have your Shopify who's taking your orders. You have you can have an answering service take your phone calls. You can have a drop shipping company ship all your product. There's no excuses now if you have a product company or a knowledge-based company like yourself or both. You can do all that through the internet, and there's no reason why you can't have a job too if you need to have one at that time. Now, when you start to realize that your time is better served at that company, then it's time to quit.
Dig that. Yeah, great answer, man. Great answer. You said something interesting about you, and I want to unpack that a little bit for everybody. Dan said like he knew he was going to win even when he lost. And when I'm coaching fighters, one of the things I tell them, I go, your loss should be a complete surprise to you. like you hadn't even what do you mean I lost? Like, I don't mean waking up from a knockout. I mean, like just you did everything you needed to do in training. You didn't need and there are days when your opponent's better than you. And that's just the way it goes. in business, there's so many things that can happen in the marketplace that you could have like a perfect plan and have total integrity and you're doing everything right and you still lose. But you step away from there going, I did everything right. And, I'm not a douchebag or a scumbag. I didn't fuck anybody. And that's where you learn. But I don't know if you want to add anything to that, because that's a foreign for people who aren't. And I love how you talked about how being in military or law enforcement or public safety actually prepares you. It creates a built-in resiliency for business. That doesn't mean you don't need some education and a business plan and maybe some mentors to get going. We're talking about is the roller coaster ride, because like I've had so many ideas in business where I go, hey, we're gonna do this T-shirt and do that, and I end up having like a box of 500, and I got to give them away over the because nobody gave it. Like I loved it, but no one else did. So
Yep.
you know what I'm talking about. But is there anything you want to add to that? Go for that. That whole.
No, just like we always, you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. If you know you have a good idea, you usually know it in your gut. I feel like God places these things on your heart, and you just know. We just knew that even though that TapouT, that there was no clothing company really based around this new sport that was emerging, that was basically illegal in every country or every state, that we just knew that we had a great product. We knew that, and we knew this because we would show it to our friends. This, Tony, I'm sure you did this too. You'd go like, you got to come watch this show. And then they would see it and go, oh my God, like, this is crazy. This is legal? People allowed to do this? And then they would become immediate fans. I have friends that I'm not a black belt in jiu-jitsu yet, but, because I'm like this long-term comes and goes and decides to do MMA and then does jiu-jitsu, and I'm back and forth, and then I got kids, and so I'm kind of all over the place, but I can defend myself, so. But I have friends who I introduced to the sport, early on or at some point during that building TapouT or prior to building TapouT, law enforcement friends that are black belts now and have their own schools, who've decided that's their business. So everybody that we introduced to the sport loved it and wanted to be a part of it. And we said, there's something to this. Like, there's something that makes people, when they watch this, want to be around it more. And that's how we felt. And we knew, because we felt like that, other people got to be feeling like that. And sure enough, we could see it in their reactions. And so we just said, we think we have something here. We really believe that if all this stuff keeps going the way we think it's going to go, that our clothing company can ride that wave along with it. And I think people, when you see a reaction, like if you came up with a new dessert and you thought, oh, this is a great idea. I mean, when who was the yogurt company that came up with, adding your own desserts, they go, and then you weigh it at the end. Like, whoever thought of that? Like, that wasn't how people did things back then. And then this new company comes along and decides that's how we're going to do it. And it caught on like wildfire, and they turned it into $1 billion company, and that's how I think when you have this idea that you feel like sets you apart from other people and you can apply it to the world, it's not a risk anymore. It's an educated guess, and you have some data to back it up, and you're going into it with glasses, with these clear lenses on, that you understand that there's going to be some risk to it. But I feel like I have a better chance of making it than not making it. So how much of a risk is that?
Yeah. And that circles back to that quote I shared right in the middle, that nothing affects a child's life more than a parent's unlived life. If you got something in you, you're listening to this and there's something you always wanted to do, I think there's some real sage advice there. Specifically, the last couple of examples where you're making an educated guess, you're bringing something new or innovative to the world, and you should go for it. And the big thing, ironically, is when I work with somebody in business on managing fear, one of the questions I ask them is, it was funny because I had a guy, I'm not going to mention his name or his company, but he's a former Marine. And when he retired, he got hired by a company in the defense space. And he called me up one day and he basically, I'm paraphrasing, he said, like, I would rather be downrange than the fear he had for managing a sales team and the quota they gave him for the year. He said, dude, I'd rather be in a gunfight. This is scary shit. And it was just a matter of, reorienting. And I've shared this a bunch of times. This is part of our No Fear program, but then understanding this neural circuitry of fear, that we have a stimulus, we're motivated, we're excited, and then something changes quickly. It could be the market, it could be your boss, or you thought you were on salary, and your boss says, "Okay, guess what? You're on commission," and you're like, "Wait," like anything. And now you're in the fear loop, and you've got to navigate the fear loop. And so it was interesting. So he ended up he had trained with me in the hand-to-hand side, and then ended up hiring me for the whole no fear mindset stuff, because, like, the missing component to pull the metaphoric trigger on doing everything is self-doubt. And self-doubt always creates hesitation. Hesitation always creates procrastination. And in the real world, in the way I love to say, violence loves speed, but so does business. That's a Vaynerchuk concept, right? Business loves speed. Just like you got to move fast. You can't just fucking sit on shit, for hours or days.
Yeah, that's very poignant. Like, self-doubt is truly what crumbles people, what puts, stops people in their tracks, because you got obviously a guy who's, been downrange. He's, capable with a firearm, and if he gets into a situation, he probably feels more comfortable in that situation than having to deal with, certain business aspects. But that's because that's where he has self-doubt. And so that's luckily we're in a world today where a mentor is just a phone call away, or a training session away, and it allows us to be able to. We've never been closer to mentors ever, and what a great opportunity! Because I know, and you know this too. In the 90s and the 80s, you didn't have mentors like that. When I was looking for a mentor, the best I had was I would watch all those infomercials from Tony Robbins, and I would record them on a VHS tape and watch them over and over again, because I just felt like he was, his charisma and his energy. I was like, I just wanted to watch these over and over again. And lucky enough, in like 2010 or 11 or 12, somewhere in there, I happened to see Tony Robbins in Mandalay Bay at the Four Seasons, and I went up to approach him, and I Tony, I got to tell you how you changed my life, because I used to watch your videotapes for energy, because there were no coaches back then like there are today. Now you can find a coach everywhere for whatever you're looking for specifically. But there were no coaches back then. And I used to watch your tapes over and over again. I finally had them. I remember he said, "Hey, if you can't afford it, you're exactly the person that needs to be buying this program." And so I bought his program. I put $800 the last pennies I had on my credit card to buy this program. And it changed my life. It changed me mentally. It changed me as a person, as a parent. And I was telling him this, and we talked for like 2 hours. And a few months later, he called my office and asked me to be in his infomercial. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I used to watch this infomercial and record it for inspiration. And now I think Serena Williams, Mark Burnett, and Donna Karen were on there with me. And me, the guy from San Bernardino, ex-police officer who had never done anything like this in his life. And all of a sudden I'm on an infomercial with Tony Robbins. So you never know where your life's going to take you if you just know fear. I mean, a lot of it is that, it's knowing that nothing's going to be easy. Those decisions you make in business or whatever you do, you're going to have fear. What do they say? Courage is not knowing fear when you go into a situation. It's knowing it's going to be scary. It's knowing that it's going to be a bad situation and going anyway. And that's what I think. That's truly what entrepreneurship is too.
Amazing. Yeah. One of our when you talk about courage and fear, one of our slogans is, you can't be brave if you're not afraid. And that the primary ingredient in courage is fear. I mean, if somebody does something that requires zero courage, they're an adrenaline junkie or something. I've got friends who are base jumpers and, ex-military guys are, and they're, and like when you ask them, hey man, you have fear, because they appear fearless, but what they're actually doing is managing their fear. They're very meticulous. They're very meticulous in how they move, how they prepare, how they train. And, when you get really good at stuff, everyone listening, like the facade that we see, somebody up on stage, public speaking, number one fear in the world. We see, like just in the last year or so, tons of videos, again, from Tyson and let's say even George St. Pierre and other people talking about fear. St. Pierre saying, that he hates fighting, that the worst day of his life is the day he's got to fight. But he recognized my buddy, Michael Gervais, who's I don't know if you know Michael, a very famous sports psychologist. But he had him on his show, and he said, if you're so scared, why'd you do it? He said, because I wanted freedom and I wanted access. I knew that if I got to this level and I went through my fear, that I would have the freedom, the financial freedom to have the access that I want to do what I want. So it's really interesting motivation. But that's, again, what we talk about is the self-awareness. And when you change your relationship with fear, guys, you can change your mind. And if you can change your mind, you can change your life. So, pretty interesting stuff there. Dan, we should start to wind this down. Is there something, I always ask all my guests this, is there something that we're going to wrap the show and you're going to go, shit, I forgot to mention this or talk about this, or I wish we had brought up this, something I didn't ask you or something you want to share? We talked about a lot of things, important things, parenting, entrepreneurship, fear, business, risk, covered a lot.
Yeah, no, it was great. I think that I keep going back to no fear. I'm like, the more I hear it, the more I say it to myself, the more I wish how one of those phrases you go, man, I wish I'd have thought of that. Because it's so true.
Yeah.
You just need to know, you need to attack your fears. And actually I'm trying to preempt that with my son, because when I put him out on stages in front of 3,000 people, he's not even scared. He was like, he got off stage and he was like, that was fun. I would be scared to death to do that. And I mean, I've been in those, but I'm like, I'm a wreck a little bit, I would say within reason. I'm a wreck for the 3 days before I have to speak, because I'm thinking about all, as an adult, you're thinking about, what if I forget something, or I don't put this together, I don't tell this story right. What if I screw that up? We're playing all those scenarios out, but I'm trying to put my son into it early so he doesn't have to think about those things, and that he's prepared. And now when he goes up in front of people like that, he's on cue. I'll put him in front of like a group of small people. I won't even tell him. I just feel like, hey, Daniel, give him the speech about the power of words. And he'll just he'll just go off. I mean, he recites the man in the arena in the middle of that right through the whole speech. He knows that whole speech by heart. And so it's just, I want to put him in those situations so that he doesn't feel fear the same way that I had to, the same way at 20 something years old, at 30 something years old, going through fear, because I feel like it's a lot harder as you get older. to, because it's hard to teach, old dogs new tricks. And when you face fear at those ages, you feel like, I should know this. I'm better than this. I should already have this handle. And if I can't do it by now at 36 or 42 or 51 or 62, then I'm probably never going to be able to do it. So what am I doing here? So I encourage at a young age, try, as soon as you can, start facing your fears as soon as you can, so that things don't become as fearful, and go out there and change the world.
I dig it, man. I love it. I'm going to send you a copy of our No Fear program to go over with your boy. It'll give you some really cool tools. A lot of parents, it's one of my missions in the next couple of years is to get parents to understand that if we can, the future is in the hands of our kids, and they're being manipulated like crazy. And one of the things about teaching people how to register the difference between the physiology of fear and the psychology of fear, because the physiology of fear is the sensation you get in your body. And so that could happen with anything outside your comfort zone. A stimulus gets introduced too quickly. And like, you could be George St. Pierre, you could be Mike Tyson. What was his thing? Sugar Sean just said this, in his last fight against Sterling, he said, that was the most apprehensive I was before any fight ever. Well, you didn't look really apprehensive, right?
No.
So what happens is, these guys through adaptation, through the training, they get what's called stress inoculated, and they learn to manage fear. The problem with in the real world is the stimulus is always unpredictable. There's a predictable stimulus. If you've got a guy you're fighting in a weight class with a certain rule set, and you've got tape on him, and you're hiring sparring partners to move like him, you can stress inoculate. As a police officer, you can do scenarios and go, we're going to go in the house, the guy's going to have a knife or not. Remember the tulip principle, you got 21 feet to make it and all this stuff, you can start to stress inoculate there. But very often in life, whether it's a relationship, health, finance, or sudden violence, even if you're trained, it can trigger a fear spike. So we need to ignore the neurobiology and embrace it. But what we need to focus on is the psychology, because the psychology is the story, the narrative we tell ourselves. And that's the Clay Guida moment, is like, he had, basic skills, but a lion's heart. And there's lots of guys that had wicked skills, but all they kept thinking is, fuck, I don't have it. This guy's better than me, or whatever it is, So that's really what we did with the whole No Fear program is, I think the most important thing we did is we differentiated between the psychology of fear and the physiology of fear, where every specialist loves to talk about fight, flight, freeze and parasympathetic, sympathetic. I looked at that in the 80s and 90s, and I said, but who cares? Like you don't have a button on your body that goes, I need more adrenaline, I need less adrenaline. I'd like to not breathe in my chest. I want to breathe in my diaphragm. We don't have buttons. What controls that is our mindset. And so the whole mind controls the body, mind navigates the body type thing. But I'll send you the course because I want you to.
I'd love to have that diagram that you posted too a few minutes ago.
Yeah, this is actually the foundation of the whole program, of just saying any scenario, there's like a surprise stimulus. It will, and this is the thing that people don't realize is the fear loop happens. You don't have a choice, right? So let's say you're going to go enter a grappling tournament this weekend, and it's a local one, and you've been training for years. You're sizing up people, and you go, you know what? This old man might actually get on the podium today, right? And you're fantasizing because you're sizing up people, because you're a guy, you've been in fights, you're a cop, you've been training, you're looking at people, you go, yeah, I can bring it. I got a little bit of clay in me, and I got a little bit of skill. And then as you're As you get warming up, Hoist walks in and signs up. And you're like, oh, fuck. Hoist. And then Gordon Ryan walks in and signs up.
Oh, geez. I just go home then.
Right. But see, what's happening is you haven't even fought yet. And you just went, I just came in third. You went from I might win to, oh, no, okay, I'm going to come in second. And this is what we explain to people over and over again is the psychology of fear has you losing. And the acronym is actually Forrest Griffith retweeted a post I made a long time ago when Michael Gervais interviewed me, where I said, we use the acronym FEAR, false expectations appearing real. And it's when I'm visualizing an event in the future that's debilitating how I think or move in the present.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah. And so like that's what a lot of people do is like, you look at somebody at the bar and you go, I'm going to go ask her to dance or ask her on a date. And you go, drink, please. Like you pause, you turn around, and then some other guy's talking to her, right? Because a fear spike creates doubt, doubt creates hesitation, hesitation creates procrastination. Mm-hmm. And in a violent encounter or in business or in relationships, the old you remember the old Ed Parker quote, those who hesitate, meditate horizontally. Did you ever hear that?
No, I've never heard that.
Yeah. Those who hesitate, meditate horizontally. Ed Parker, he was the guy.
Makes sense, though. Yeah.
Okay, man. I kept you long enough.
Stop you in your tracks before you even get going, and you can't let it do that. Otherwise, that's probably so many people out there who could have done great things, but they got stopped before they even got started.
Yeah, and most of it's up here. Hey, man, it was so good to catch up. Thanks for sharing.
It's great.
So much of your wisdom and insights, and we'll stay in touch. And as you do more great things, we'll get you back on the show and talk about them. And stand by in the back. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit after. Those of you who logged in, thank you. Please share this and follow us on YouTube. As always, we talked a lot about no fear in here. Elisa, do we have the no fear graphic? Here that I want to show the no fear program. Yeah. Let's go back for a second. Dan, what's the best way to get in touch with you if people want to follow you, follow the podcast?
At TapouT Punkass on most of the platforms, at TapouT Punkass, and check us out at Pretty and Punk podcast on Instagram, and of course all the major platforms that have podcasting, including YouTube. You can catch us Pretty and Punk podcast, and follow us. Check us out, and be sure to follow the BKFC too. I have some ownership in the BKFC, and I'm a consultant for the BKFC Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship.
They got some crazy stuff, guys. I just put a couple of links for No Fear and our human weapon program. I spent a year putting this together. How to defend yourself without martial arts. How's that for some clickbait, headline? This is understanding how to weaponize the startle response, how to leverage fear when you're afraid, when you're scared. Sudden violence will trigger a startle response. Your hands will come up to protect your head, and learning how to weaponize that almost like a Pavlovian response. It functions like a biological airbag. So check that out. Okay. So we're going to wrap this up, guys. Thank you for listening, and please share this with your friends, and we'll see you on the next episode. Dan, stand by in the background, and we're going to wrap this up.